So my goal with this build was to turn your Warlock into a walking nuke, and I have to say that I think we accomplished that goal. The Grandmaster gameplay you're watching is all solo, and this opening section here on the moon has 6 barrier champs, 1 unstoppable champ. It has the Beefy Deathtongue Hive enemy that takes all of your abilities away if it reaches the totem. It also has a knight mini boss at the end, along with a ton of enemies like the Yellow Bar Knights and the Yellow Bar Wizards. So if you can clear out all this section, especially solo, then you have a build that is definitely worthwhile to run. And we do a pretty good job of that. Now everything starts with your healing rift and the Hellion aspect. Of course we get the constant restoration from our rift, and your allies can also hop in and out of your rift for some healing as well, but we pair that with the Hellion aspect to give us that solar mortar buddy that we have up all the time. Well, not only do you get a ton of passive damage from that Hellion, but what's really key here is that it scorches on hit, then sets off an ignition every 3 hits. Now the scorch plays perfectly into our fragment Ember of Singeing, where when you apply scorch to a target, you get 400% class ability recharge for 3 seconds. And this applies to every enemy that you scorch. So we have an infinite loop here of Scorch with our Hellion that's feeding our class ability back, which in turn gives us the Hellion back. Probably one of the best synergies in Destiny 2 with this little loop to give us infinite healing with our class ability and infinite Hellion being available to us. Now before we jump into the rest of the build, we have a quick sponsor. You guys know how much I enjoy builds in games, right? Well, Raid has an endless amount of content, and the best part is the builds that you can spec your champions out with. Thank you to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video, and special thanks to Universal Studios licensing. Now we all watched He-Man from our childhood, right? Well, Raid Shadow Legends is partnering with Universal Products and Experiences and Mattel to bring He-Man and Skeletor to the game as legendary champions. So starting from November 25th to December 25th, you can get your hands on both champions. Everyone can get the legendary champion Skeletor for free, simply by logging into Raid for 14 days between November 25th and January 8th. You'll get Skeletor on day 7, and extra bonus rewards for the next 7 days after that. Players can also complete the champion pass to get the legendary champion He-Man. Now you gotta admit, that sounds pretty cool, right? So make sure to click my link at the top of the description, or scan my QR code that you see on screen to get these awesome bonuses only through my link. You will get a huge starter pack with an epic champion Tagoar from the Orc faction, and then once you hit level 15, you'll get another starter pack that includes an epic Grizzled Jarl from the Dwarves faction as well. And to top it off, you can use the promo code Monkey King to get a legendary champion Sun Wukong for free. This promo code is available till the end of November, so make sure you're fast and take advantage of that. Make sure you guys don't miss out on this awesome deal, and I think you will enjoy Raid and the builds as much as I have. Thank you to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring today's video. Now our second aspect is going to be Touch of Flame, and we're going to pair that with the Healing Grenade. This allows that Healing Grenade to give us Restoration ×2, and as you see in the gameplay, we have Restoration ×2 for up to 15 seconds long, and we have that up pretty much all the time. And then for your melee ability, we do take Celestial Fire. I was playing a little further back with this build, and I do like Incinerator Snap more, but you do have to be close enough to use that melee. And Celestial Fire has a longer range, and we do get this melee back very quickly with the exotic we're using. So even though it has a longer cooldown time, that's okay, because we can proc Radiant from really far away, and as you can see in the left hand side as well, we keep up Radiant pretty much all the time. And speaking of keeping both Restoration and Radiant up, we pair that with Ember of Empyrean. This allows Solar Weapon or Ability Final Blows to extend the duration of Restoration and Radiant effects applied to you. Both can stack up to 15 seconds, and any Solar Weapon or Ability triggers this. So this can be our Hellion that's getting kills, it can be Scorch that's getting kills, it can be Ignitions that getting kills, and both of our Solar Weapons we're going to be using, which are very strong Solar Weapons. Now I will say, if you're running this with a group and you're not solo and you're finding yourself not keeping up Ember of Empyrean, and you could replace this fragment with Ember of Benevolence. This is applying Restoration, Cure, or Radiant to your allies, grants increased grenade, melee, and class ability regeneration. And again, this is another 400% additional ability energy to all 3, and it lasts for 6 seconds long. And you can just keep reprocking this. So if someone walks into your Healing Rift and out of it, it will just proc Benevolence over and over. If your Healing Grenade heals them, it procs it over and over. And if you proc Radiant and they're near you, again, it procs it over and over. So instead of keeping up Restoration or Radiant, you will have abilities to keep using over and over to keep both of those buffs up. So when you're playing with a group, that's up to you to decide whether Benevolence is better or Empyrean is better for you. Our last 2 fragments will be Ember of Torches and Ember of Ashes. Ember of Ashes, you apply more Scorch stacks to targets. This just allows us to get to a quicker ignition, whether that's through our abilities, through the Hellion Mortar, or through our Solar Weapon Heavy that we're using. And then Ember of Torches allows you to become Radiant when you hit someone with your melee ability, and you'll make your allies Radiant. That's a 25% weapon damage bonus to all your weapons. Still one of the best buffs in the game. And speaking of your weapons, for your heavy slot, we'll take Dragon's Breath. This got its reserves bump up in the last season or two, I don't remember exactly which one it was. But now with one reserve mod on your chest, you're literally holding 11 shots with this thing. And you guys know how strong Dragon's Breath is. All the gameplay you're watching too doesn't have any solar burn or doesn't have a buff to your rocket damage. So imagine if a solar burn was active here and everything was doing 25% more damage. And then as my secondary weapon, I took Aberrant Action. This is the solar sidearm from last season. You can get Incandescent and Demolitionist, or you can do Heal Clip and Demolitionist, kind of up to you what you want to run. But this solar sidearm is very good. And again, it plays perfectly into our Ember of Empyrean and keeping up Restoration and Radiant for us. For the exotic armor piece, we'll take Dawn Chorus. And I'm pairing that with Dawn Blade, of course. This allows your Daybreak projectiles to deal more damage and scorch targets on impact. The reason this is so good as well now is because Dawn Blade got the 3 times regeneration increase. So now the damage you deal allows you to get the super that much quicker. And Dragon's Breath deals great damage, and ignitions count as those damage, right? Any outgoing damage you're doing. So when you have ignitions going off, you're shooting stuff with your weapon and your Hellion is hitting with its damage and you have all your scorch damage happening, you're having a ton of outgoing damage that refills your super very quickly. In this opening section of this Grandmaster, I think I popped my super 5 or 6 times, and I could have done it even quicker if I wanted to, but I wanted to save it for either a high health target or a champion. Also, Daybreak with Dawn Chorus does really good damage. I'm not exactly sure where it falls in the whole like what super does the most damage type stuff, but if I remember correctly back in the day, this thing was doing roughly close to like 1,000,000 damage on any boss. And so if you just stick something with Dragon's Breath and pop the super, you have Dragon's Breath dealing damage, your Hellion doing damage, and you're throwing your super out doing damage. And since you get it 3 times as fast, don't be scared to just pop it all the time. The other nice thing about Dawn Chorus is your Scorch is improved and you gain a small amount of melee energy when you Scorch damage a target. Now that Scorch damage only comes into play in harder content, and it does deal 200% more damage, which is great, but if stuff is dying too quickly in easier content, you don't really get the benefit of that extra Scorch damage, right? So of course in Grandmasters, it's a lot better. It's just more overall damage, again, that's feeding our super. And then you get 5% melee energy back per tick. It's not a crazy amount, but since we're scorching so much in all the different enemies, right, you will end up having that melee back very quickly, even though we are using Celestial Fire that has a longer cooldown. Now let's go over the mods. On the helmet, we'll take 2 Harmonic Siphons just to spawn some nice Orbs of Power with those solar weapons. We'll also take a heavy ammo finder, try to keep that heavy ammo up in Dragon's Breath. On the gauntlets, I'll take a grenade kickstart. This is where our armor charges will be used, and it'll just allow us to get a nice 30% of our grenade back, since our healing grenade is restoration times 2, and I do want to have that up. This is not as important if you're running Ember of Benevolence, because you'll have it back very quickly when you're proccing that off allies. But since I was solo, I wasn't proccing that, right? So I just wanted to give it a nice little jump start all the time. We'll also take Impact Induction. Causing damage with a powered melee attack reduces your grenade cooldown, and Heavy Handed. Your powered melee final blows create Orbs of Power. On your chest, this is just your damage reduction, so match whatever activity you're doing. At base, at least take an Arc, Solar, and Void resistance in each of those slots. On your boots, we'll take 1 Solar Scavenger. This just allows us to get more ammo every time we pick up a brick. And then Recuperation to replenish health each time you pick up an Orb of Power, and Innervation, reduce grenade cooldown each time you pick up an Orb of Power. If you're keeping up your Restoration times 2, or you're playing around your healing with, you could drop Recuperation here if you want, and slide something else in. On the class item, we'll take Reaper. So when we drop that Rift, our next weapon kill will spawn an Orb of Power. Of course, you're getting those weapon kills with Dragon's Breath after you drop your Rift, so that's pretty easy. And then a Double Bomber. Since we are dropping our Rift pretty often, it's nice just to get that 17% grenade energy coming back to the healing grenade. So when you combine both these bombers and the grenade kickstart, you're getting close to half of your healing grenade back right away after you use it. And again, I want to emphasize that nothing in the artifact really benefits this build this season, and there's no solar burn happening here. This is all done just raw power of the build alone. So if you had a solar surge going and all of this was doing 25% more damage, you'd be looking pretty good out there, right? I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Have a great rest of your day.